Good Monday afternoon. Welcome to a football show here from 440 Sports. Of course, that is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We are going to react to everything we saw over the weekend at the NFL Combine. We've got some grand sweeping statements to be made, Zach Lyons, and of course, many other people making lots of grand sweeping statements that are quite stupid. But ours will be very smart and quite good. So there you go. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir? How was your weekend filling out your tool?
It was good. It was easy. The tool is pretty much completed for the most part. Still got to do bench presses and stuff, but it's all looking good.
All right. So, what is your favorite part of your tool? Is it like the average? Is it the RAS? Is it the new drop down? Like what's
I think the new
part?
drop down. I mean, when you look at it, you're able to see percentile rankings. You're able to compare and contrast, and you're also able to look at their, in a little handy dandy graph.
See how there's like no tight ends in this class that are athletically available to be drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. Something like
William
that.
says, can mark a football show off my list of finally making a live show. We've been live for like 2 years.
Well, no, maybe William couldn't make it. Maybe
gotcha.
Maybe
Gotcha.
couldn't make it. So we do appreciate you, William, finding the time.
I misinterpreted it.
And here's the thing: if you guys want to ask questions about individual players, we will do that today. There are certainly players that I think. There's some players, and this is what's weird about watching the Combine. There's certain players that I'm kind of pissed they did well. Like, there's certain guys that I really like that I want the Titans or even the Packers, for that matter, to have an opportunity to be targeting in rounds like 3 and 4. And now I think they might be like late second round picks because they did so well at all the things. And I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that, but I do feel validated because I really like this player. So it's like this very weird. It's this very weird reaction that I have.
There's only 64 players that can go in the first 2 rounds, so that there is some I guess relief you should be able to have. Take solace in the fact that there's only 64 players that can go.
Yep, that's all. There's somebody has to fall beyond 64. It has to happen. So we're going to get into a lot of those names. I do have a question about quarterbacks that I think could change. I just want to get your prediction on the record for a quick quarterback question at the start here. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans. I think one of your big takeaways from this weekend is the Titans must add picks. The question is, how do they do that? So we'll get into that. It looks like we might be down to 2 players at the top there for pick number 7. Should they stay and pick? And then we have sort of some bigger picture questions about athleticism, about the offensive line, about length, about some of these traits that people are obsessed with, and if they are something that we need to be tracking as it evolves throughout the course of the game. It's a very complicated setup, but you'll understand what we're talking about when we get into it. So if you are watching right now, and I can already see Square Up and William and a bunch of you guys in there, if you could please hit subscribe on the YouTube page, hit retweet on Twitter, hit share on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So all that good stuff across any platform. If you're catching us, we do appreciate it. And of course, Sinkers Beverages, the #1 liquor store in the in the city of Nashville, 3 straight years, as voted on by you folks, the wonderful and amazing users. Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. Its sister store, Blue Gas Beverages, up in Hendersonville. Join the in crowd. That is the only way you have access to what we are going to be doing when the Titans are on the clock during the NFL draft on Thursday night, coming up in about a month and a half, 2 months. So we've got some stuff planned for you, but you have to join the in crowd at Sinkers Beverages. They've got everything you could possibly need: wine, beer, tequila, great beer selection, great wine knowledge, huge bourbon wall. If you like tequila and you want to seek out some new stuff and try some new stuff, they got you covered there as well. And of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Make sure you check out our great friends over there at buildkg.com. We'll tell you more about them coming up in just a minute. Is it fair to say, Zach, that your #1 takeaway from the weekend, was it tied to what you saw, or is it tied to sort of the evolution of your view of the Titans roster, that this team must add more picks?
I have been a big proponent since the offseason started, probably dating back since they got rid of their 3rd round pick, that the Tennessee Titans have to add more day 2, early day 3 picks in this particular draft, and the Combine just cemented it. Like, it became like that would be nice to they just have to. They can't miss out on the obvious talent and depth at certain positions that really probably die off really after the 4th round. You're still going to find players in the 5th and 6th and 7th that are really good that can contribute, but like I would say after the 4th round on day 3, it's going because you got all the compensatory picks that come through. Because, like we said, there's only 64 that can be drafted in the first 2 rounds. It's 32 plus 32. Well, starting in the 3rd round is when comp picks kick in for various things, players leaving, for hiring or getting coaches hired, get GMs hired. So that depth will get eaten up really quickly in the 3rd and the 4th round. So you have to find ways to get more picks in there. Whether that's the 1st round pick and you trade back a few spots, whether that's the 2nd round pick, there you have 2 opportunities to do so. I don't think there's any players that you can trade away for that on this particular roster that can get you one of those. Maybe Harold Landry, maybe DeAndre Hopkins, but are those 2 guys you really want to get rid of? I'm not going to cry if Harold Landry's gone, but are those 2 guys that you really want to get rid of at this point? Probably not. But you have to find ways to get picks, and because of how John Robinson has attacked free agency, how Rand Carthon had to be a little bit aggressive last year, the lack of diversity hires up until now, it's been really hard to get compensatory picks, and this has been traditionally a team that does not get compensatory picks. But when you look at San Francisco and how they've been able to handle it, when you look at the makeup of the staff, when you look up at the makeup of some of the decision makers, just seems like an opportunity for a team to get compensatory picks. It won't be for free agency because they have to spend money in free agency. But, yeah. Anthony Robinson, who's gotten a lot of exposure and who's very well respected around the league, if he gets hired after this year for a general manager position, boom, there's your compensatory pick.
All right, so a lot of you guys in the comments here, a couple of you, looks like Stoney and Square Up already. Brian Thomas seems like an absolute dog. I think he hit a 4.33. It's pretty clear that he's the number 4 receiver. Stoney's in on Brian Thomas as well. Square Up says it sucks. It seems that neither of the Texas receivers will fall to 38 anymore. I don't know if that's a terrible thing. I think there's some Schadenfreude going on.
A lot of combine hype on there.
Some Schadenfreude with their numbers there for both those guys, but who tested again. Xavier Worthy broke a record, 4.21. As I told you, Xavier Legette and Adonai Mitchell are going to make huge waves in the athleticism department. They did. That doesn't mean the Titans should be targeting them at 38 or anywhere else. And of course, this is where I want to get to sort of my main point to start here with Elliott sort of setting me up here. I'm guessing the Titans need a quarterback to drop to 7, then the Vikings to trade up for that pick. That's a path to more picks. So I'm going to combine what I already thought with the combine sort of cementing what I thought, and then some other rumors that I think are starting to bubble up, like where does Kirk Cousins land? Is Justin Fields actually going to stay in Chicago? Is number 2 Washington really willing to trade up to number 1 to get the number 1 pick, which would be completely bizarre? The rumors this week that the Raiders are looking to move up into the top 10, potentially picks 5 through 8 maybe, to draft a quarterback. J.J. McCarthy has set himself up clearly as the number 3 quarterback through the combine and through the testing, his age, his measurables, etc. So I have a receiver offensive line perspective that I sort of cemented this weekend with the combine. But this quarterback thing, I think, adds to it. And that is, if you are going to get one of the top 3 receivers, I think we have all established and all feel comfortable that one of these 3 guys is better than everybody else in the draft class, maybe better than almost every other position in the draft class, and that one of these 3 guys is generational and would change the offense for the next 8 to 10 years and is a pretty much can't-miss prospect. Rome Odunze was the only one who wanted to work out, and he did everything great. So I think all the 3 of these guys are pretty clearly elite options. If they are not going to go receiver, take that back. If they want to go receiver, trading down doesn't make much sense to me. If you're trying to trade back to 13, 14, 15, maybe Brian Thomas is available, but I still think that's a major drop-off from the top 3. Whereas with tackle, if Alt is or whoever else you love is not there, or you want to trade back to 13 or 14 or 15, I don't think the gap between that top tier tackle Alt and the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th guys at tackle is nearly as large. I think does that make sense? I think the drop off after the top 3 receivers is significantly higher.
I could see that, but I think that Alt is the only one without any questions. I think all these questions about Alt are kind of like made up. But seeing Olu Fashianu's hand size, that's not good. And I know that people are like, well, what you could do about hand size? Why does hand size matter? It matters when you go up against NFL players that are going to be bigger than the college players that you want to. It matters in particular aspects. I think there's a less of a drop off between the top 3 wide receivers and Brian Thomas than Joe Alt to the next guy.
Well, okay, that's fair. I guess ultimately I'm looking at sort of
Ultimately, here's what you want, because I think you kind of like muddied the waters of your own point here. Is that you want as many quarterbacks to go ahead of the Tennessee Titans? Okay, that is your ultimate goal, I think, in what you were trying to say.
Well,
because here's why.
Yes. But
here's where the market's at for quarterbacks. Next year's quarterback class is nowhere near as good as this quarterback class. Even the New York Giants need to consider taking a quarterback in this class and take it in the first round, because I think that when you talk about guys like J.J. McCarthy, obviously the top 2, Drake May, Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and Michael, and to a lesser extent, Michael Penix Jr., all those guys may be there if you're a team in the second round, but I wouldn't count on it with the way that the draft class is set up in the future. That matters in the NFL. Teams need to be, here's where I'm at. If I'm the New York Giants, I can't risk taking a quarterback in the second or third that's not one of these top guys. So I need to take him in the first round. So they're obviously a trade back candidate as well, but you have to find, either way, you have a good chance of having 5 quarterbacks go in front of you and you having the pick of the litter, which allows you the flexibility to trade back still and pick up picks and not lose out on one of those guys. You just cannot go back all the way to 28.
No. So to me, Denver, I think it's Denver 13. You got the Raiders are in there. You got the Saints are in there looking at a move up. I think it's like 12 to 15. And ultimately, I think, to your point, maybe I did muddy it up. I think the fact that J.J. McCarthy's moving up boards, Jaden Daniels might be falling down boards. Again, just guessing here, but that would have been my order anyway before the combine.
That was a peculiar situation with the top 2 LSU prospects and their wording on stuff and the way they chose to go about it. I don't really like either of that.
To me, if you trade, and let's just say hypothetically, this goes to, we have to get more picks. We have to get more picks. This team needs more picks. So let's say hypothetically they're dead set on trading out of the 7 spot. They love the options there, but they're going to trade off. I think it makes more sense if you move back to 13, 14, 15 to take a tackle. I just think there's not nearly as much of a drop off in the discrepancy in the options that you will have at tackle or even offensive line. Yes, it needs to be a tackle, but there are some elite weapons, elite pieces on the offensive line that are going to be available in that. That is not a big drop off from the 7th pick, especially if Alt's gone at that point. But if you are dead set on trading out, it makes more sense to trade out to draft a tackle than to trade out to draft a receiver, because I think the depth at receiver is much later. Like we've said, once you miss out on the top 3, you guys can love Brian Thomas if you want, and that's fine. I would much rather take Ricky Pearsall in the 3rd round and have an extra pick and still get a tackle of my choice at 13, 14, or 15. You package that with the fact that it looks like a few quarterbacks might be going up the board. We don't know what's going to happen with Fields or Cousins. And I'm seeing the depth of these offensive linemen just going like, the difference between 7th, 10th, 12th, 14th, 18th, the pick at tackle outside of maybe Alt is just not that different. I already felt that way anyway. I was doing the mock draft thing last week, trading back to 13 and taking a guy that I like there, and Fuaga, or I don't know if Fontenot is going to play tackle or not. He looks like he might be given a chance to play tackle. The kid out of Washington,
he should be given a chance.
His arms are longer than Fuaga's.
Yeah.
I mean, so, but like I see all this stuff working together in concert, going like, man, moving back to 13, grabbing an extra 2nd and an extra 3rd. That's where you get your corner and your receiver.
Here's where you kind of lose me on this, is that you just said you're picking up a 2nd and a 3rd. The depth is at OT. Brian Thomas is better than anybody you're going to get at wide receiver by a long shot in the 2nd or 3rd. Whereas, okay, if you get Tyler Guyton, you're kind of like, okay, well, Patrick Paul's probably closer to Tyler Guyton than Brian Thomas is to Xavier Legette. You get what I'm saying? So if you get
Yeah, I don't
Patrick
love
Law,
yes, I don't love Guyton. So
I mean,
yes,
that's
your
just
point is right.
the guys that are around there on the 13th. If it, to me, I think that even if you go back to 13, Brian Thomas is so close to being a blue chipper, and I am going to go on the record today. We're starting it. Me and Stoney have talked about it over the weekend. Brian Thomas is going to have a better career than Malik Neighbors. There you go. You've heard it here
Okay.
first.
Okay.
Brian Thomas is going to have a better career than Malik Neighbors. There you go. So I
Okay.
am kind of high. I think Brian Thomas is very close to blue chip territory.
Okay.
Very, very close. He's young, but he's got everything you want. He's got the physicality. He's got the yards after catch. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got the athleticism. He's got the nice hands that are not going to drop a ball. And he's got everything that you want. And I think more people need to be. I think more people need to be open to the idea that there's not that much of a drop off between Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. I think you could almost put him in there.
First of all, Elliot just joined the in crowd for Sinkers. Yes, that is exactly how you get ready for our NFL draft party. And you can involve. We'll have drinks and food and all kinds of great stuff. So make sure you sign up for the in crowd at Sinkers Beverages. PKB says, I think the chances that Mitchell slide to 38 are now 0. He's closer to a mid first. I don't think that he's first, but I think he's late first. But I think that's okay. I think Worthy and Mitchell and Leggett and a handful of these other receivers not being available and in play at 38 is actually a good thing for the Titans. I actually like that. Elliot says, of course, bring Pretty Ricky to Nashville. Ricky Pearsall is my guy. I've been talking about him for weeks. That is the guy I want if they have a third-round pick or maybe even a trade back in the second round. That is the guy that I have the man crush for. There's plenty of corners, I think, that did a great job this week. We'll get into some of these other names as well. But that's a bold statement. I will say this. I think I've settled on Harrison 1, Odunze 2, Neighbors 3. I think I've settled on that. And I think I'm fine with Thomas clearly at 4. I think there's a drop-off there that maybe there's a chance you move back to 14 and Thomas isn't even there. And so you have to be ready and willing to take a tackle at that situation. Or I guess maybe even a corner, maybe. I don't know. But I just think there's better value at tackle in the mid-teens than there is at receiver. And they need picks. They need picks so bad because even this week, I think this weekend confirm there's really good value at linebacker, at running back, at corner, at receiver, all of these positions they could use pass rush but it's all in the second, third, and fourth round. It's all in that range.
I think this ultimately comes down to the fact that I think both of us are probably close on this. You may add the third name, but to me, the only two names at 7 that you are taking that are realistically going to be there are Joe Alt and Rome Odunze. To me, those are the only two guys.
I'm kind of with you on that. And that's
even if Malik Neighbors is there, I think I would still say Joe Alt, Rome Odunze, or a trade back before I'd say Malik Neighbors. Something about Malik Neighbors this weekend, the way that he's handled this process, and there's some concerns that show up on tape of some games too, and this kind of goes to Marvin Harrison Jr. He kind of seems like he gives up and makes business decisions at some points, but there's sometimes something about the reason why I think I'm out on Malik Neighbors is because I think Brian Thomas is the better prospect, and
I'm
that's
out at
I'm
Neighbors at 7 is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah,
I'm out at Neighbors at 7.
So to me, it's like I also want to throw this out, and I'll save for Mitchell Worthy later.
Never Neighbors.
But there, I come to the point where to me it's clearly Alt or Odunze are the guys that first off I think the Tennessee Titans like the best, and I think they are the guys that are clearly the best available at their position when it comes down to when the Titans pick a 7.
Here's how my board goes mentally. Like it's not changed a lot, but I think it's changed a touch, which is Marvin Harrison 1, Joe Alt 2, Rome Odunze 3, Brock Bowers 4. That might be my actual order of prospects. Now, again, I'm removing quarterbacks from the equation because the Titans aren't in the market for that. But if you told me all right, just sort of remove quarterbacks, who are the best prospects on the board? I think it might be Harrison, Alt, Odunze in that order. And there's no chance Harrison gets to 7. So the question is, does Alt or Odunze? Here's my question. If they're both there, who are you taking? Alt?
I am taking Alt. They're taking Odunze.
Yeah, I think that could be smart. So ultimately, how do they add picks? I think Odunze, and it's not just because he worked out this weekend. I just think we said this last week on the show. He is a far more polished football player at being where he is supposed to be. He saved Michael Penix on those deep routes, on those contested catches. He's a great red zone target right away. He way better athletically for a player of his size than people realize. He's not going to have like that immediate burst right off the line, but he will beat man coverage because he's big and he can do it. I'm come around on Odunze at 7, and he's the only other one I like outside of Alt, really. And so if you're sitting there at 7, I've heard a lot of people talk about Bowers more in like the 12 to 15 range, and I just don't think I love him as a fan of football, but I agree. I think it's kind of Alt or Odunze now at number 7, and if it's not one of those two, I think you need to bust your ass to move back to 11, 10, 12, 14, take a tackle, and then add yourself some extra picks. So we shall see. It sounds like Stoney agrees with us. Odunze and Alt are his favorite players in the draft.
I mean, I just think that's their favorite players too. Like I just don't see anything that says that it's not going to be one of those two guys. And sure, it depends on what other teams do, but I don't know. It just seems like that is a given at this point that one of those guys is going to be a Tennessee Titan if they stay there and pick.
Yep. I tend to agree with that if they stay there and pick. So the question is offensive line. Like, there are some big picture trends that we want to address about the offensive line. And some of these guys, I think a few of these names are guys that are just incredible athletes. Right? There's some of these guys, like we look at the traits, right, of Guyton. We look at the traits. Why is the guy from BYU now? I'm blanking on the kid from BYU, the tackle. Is it Kingsley? What the hell's his name?
Kingsley Suamatia.
Suamatia, like incredible, like 5-star kid coming out of high school, right? Like great athletically. Amarius Mims, great athletically. Like these guys are just great athletes, very, very long. And it seems like the guys who are shorter, the Fuagas and the Fatanus and some of these other guys, and this is probably why Alt's number 1 because he doesn't have any of these weaknesses. But the guys who have maybe a shorter arm, but have better tape, they are better. They're just better at their craft. We have a problem at the offensive line right now in football, and it's not just the NFL. It's not just this draft. It's not just the Titans. We've said it before. It's college football. It's high school football. Do we need to change how we evaluate traits for offensive linemen?
We don't, because we can't until the NFL does. And that's my thing, is that the NFL is coming into the way. I don't know what it is about these athletes and that are coming in now, these offensive linemen, but more and more offensive linemen are straddling that 33 and a half, 33 and less, range and arm length and wings and lower wingspans. And so to me, I look at it and I go, they somehow, the NFL has to recognize that a trend is coming, and they're going to run out of lengthy offensive tackles at some point. And you're going to have to figure out, you might as well start planning out and figuring out now a new threshold to be able to compensate for what's going to happen in the future, right? It's always about planning several years ahead. And so the drills that you run, the techniques that you teach, what you see on tape, at some point it's going to catch up, right? At some point we're going to see a draft class. Let's just look at the offensive tackles real quick. There are, on this particular, there were, compared to last year, there were over, on offensive tackles, this is not including some of the tackles that are listed as guards that I've already put over to guard, right? But there are 15 that did the offensive tackle drills that have less than 34-inch arms. That's up. That number's going to keep going up. And the wingspans are also shrinking. So at some point, you're going to have to figure out, like, okay, Fuaga is one of those guys that's right there. So a lot of people have said that Fuaga could probably play at left tackle and that they're not concerned about his arms because of the strength that he has. So obviously we have to kind of use that, but teams are going to have to find guys and start training them to be tackles. They can't switch everybody to guard. There's only 2 guard spots and there's so many offensive linemen. And everybody just wants to switch everybody to guard. At some point, they're going to have to start learning and trying to find ways to build success and change the narrative.
Well,
they're
okay.
just going to have to.
Yeah, and so I found this discussion interesting. First of all, number one, I think athleticism as a general trait for big people, line of scrimmage players, is far less scarce than it used to be. It used to be a scarcity thing, which made it an asset to be like Jadeveon Clowney sized as a defensive end, right? To be 6'6" and 265 pounds or 70 pounds and be able to run a 4.5 like that. Dallas Turner did that without even breaking a sweat. Like, so to me, number one, athleticism is less scarce as a commodity, therefore easier to get, which means you don't need to value it as much. That's number one. I think that's a part of this. And then to your point about the arms, like not everybody can get moved inside. But what I find interesting, and this ties into this conversation we've been having for months now about the offensive line not being developed on any level of the game. Some of these guys have a lot of tools, a lot of athleticism, like we just talked about. But the things you see on tape, the things you read about these players, and some of the questions about Kingsley or Guyton or Mims or some of these other guys that clearly have all the tools, is that they don't, to your point, they don't do the thing. They don't block the way Fuaga blocks. Like,
right.
Fuaga has the correct hand placement, the perfect, he's got the power to go with it, but he puts his hands in the right place at the right time all the time. Does that make up for a couple of inches of arm length? It should, I would assume. Here's
and
ultimately,
he played against good competition.
Yeah.
See, that's the big thing that's the big thing is like this guy, and we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but Tanner Bortolini that everybody's fallen in love with. Well, against NFL competition, he got put on his ass, and at the Senior Bowl, he was getting dog walked back into the thing because he has no functional strength. And that was the problem with Skoronski and going through this draft process is that, like, okay, because Fuaga, you can have some short arms, right? But he's got the strength. He's got NFL level strength.
Yes.
And Skoronski did not have NFL level strength at the tackle position against the best competition that he saw at Northwestern. And that's something I brought up at Stack in the Inbox when we were going through this whole thing is that, like, you can have shorter arms, but you better have some functional strength. And all throughout the pro day process and the offseason meetings, everybody brought up Skoronski's lack of power and punch. Fuaga doesn't have that issue. So, like, when you get into these things, the teams are going to have to start focusing on power if they're going to go the short arms. And I think Fuaga is a perfect example. Like, to me, it's like everybody's like, well, Fuaga's got really short arms. Well, he's got bigger arms than Skoronski. He's got bigger wingspan than Skoronski. But I'm taking Fuaga and putting him at left tackle if I draft him, even if I'm the Tennessee Titans, because I think that he has everything that you want, and you can build around and his skill set.
He's also, like, again, Skoronski 6'4", 310. Fuaga 6'6", 330. Like, there's functional strength there as well, and equally as athletic. What I think is interesting, and here's my question to you, because like J.C. Latham, for example, a guy we have not talked a lot about, it seems like has a ton of power.
He needed a sports bra. His titties were flopping everywhere.
But his power is not a problem. The run blocking is not going to be a problem for him. I think Amarius Mims, I think he is, as everyone has said, one of the most interesting prospects we've ever had. Is he a top 10 pick if he started more games, or is he not? I don't know. Troy Fatanu, who some people think is a guard, he's built more like Skoronski, right? Like 6'4", 315. The arms, longer arms than Fuaga. The question I have is, what skill set, if we're talking about a position where they have one of the best coaches on the planet, what are the things that you can teach, can fix more equally, more readily if you're Bill Callahan and the offensive line coach? And to me, for example, the BYU kid with like hand placement, that's something you should be able to teach real quickly. But if it's not, but if you don't have, like, I lock onto you and I drive you into the ground with a killer instinct, finishing is one of the things that I was taught when I worked at for the recruiting services trying to evaluate linemen is like attitude. Like somebody wants to finish you into the ground, and you can't really coach some of that killer instinct sometimes. So what is the skill you think is like you're okay?
I'm with you. I think it's all about and I think this is how he views it as well. Bill Callahan views it as well. It's all about having that attitude. I think when you look at a guy like, guys like Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, they drafted him right after he left, Tyler Smith. But, the guys that he has traditionally done well with have that attitude. But they also have the knowledge and the smarts to be able to learn stuff, if you get what I'm saying. Like, learn from your mistake at once. You saw like Dylan Radins. He couldn't not get a false start to save his life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously something in his head is just not there. And Bill Callahan's not going to let you get 5, false starts in every game or 2 in one game, and you're still going to be playing for him. So Fuaga is a guy I really, really like. Just to give you a little insight, his on the field metrics, stat wise, not the athleticism testing or anything, second best to what the Tennessee Titans decision makers now have traditionally drafted. A lot of people really like Fuaga, and Fuaga has been a name that's been around. Some people think he's the best offensive tackle.
He's been my guy.
I think he is the second.
I think he's number 2. I think he's number 2.
I think he's number 2, and I'm with you. And I think that just what he has, you can't teach. And I like JC Latham is the same way. What they have, you just can't teach. And they have this attitude, this mean streak. Give me an offensive lineman with some mean streak, because Andre Dillard does not have a mean streak. Jalen Duncan doesn't really have a mean streak. Dylan Radins doesn't have a mean streak. Give me a guy that's mean and is going to do it through power, but also has the athleticism, because Talise Fuaga had some great athleticism on display this week.
Yes, quick feet, good lateral movement, the whole deal. To me, I think the perfect move is to trade down to 13, get Fuaga, and draft and get an extra second and an extra third. That to me, I am all in on move down 5-6 spots, still get Fuaga, because I think there's a chance that all 3 of them are available at 7. Including Fashanu and maybe somebody else. Like, I think all those guys could be there at 7. Maybe Alt's already gone, but I think so many of these stupid quarterbacks are going to go. Like, people are going to move up for JJ McCarthy. People are going to move up for Jaden Daniels. Maybe I think Daniels actually is the one that slips.
They're all just waiting to see. They're all just waiting to see where Kirk Cousins and Justin Fields ends up.
Yeah,
that's what they're waiting on. That's the 2 things to get this quarterback or this trade market moving for the NFL draft. They're waiting on those 2 things, because I think there could be at least 2 or 3 deals done way before the draft, sometime over the next 2 or 3 weeks after Fields and Cousins find a spot, that you're going to see teams go ahead and just get the deal out of the way and get the trade out of the way.
Well, and I don't have the order in front of me, but where are the Raiders picking again? Why am I drawing a? They're 13. They're 14.
I thought they were 14.
Okay, so it's Denver. It's 11 Minnesota, 12 Denver, Vegas 13, New Orleans 14. They could all need a quarterback.
New Orleans 14. Mm-hmm.
All 4 of those teams could use a quarterback, and all you got to do is move back 4 spots, 5 spots, 6 spots, and you might still get a guy again. Oregon State.
It wasn't just that long ago where teams got an extra first for people moving up a few spots, and this is the quarterback class right now, the trade up market and the quarterbacks is in perfect alignment for the Tennessee Titans to get a 1st round pick next year and a 2nd round pick this year on top of just moving back a few spots. Yeah. That's really good value. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it sure does seem like it's pretty good value to go ahead and get that done.
Because, and we're going to get to some of these names, but you look at some of the names that you and I told people about last week, did well and are moving up. And they will be positions of need for the Titans that don't come to name at receiver and tackle, right? It's going to be like maybe a center. Maybe it's a defensive lineman next to Simmons. Maybe it's an edge rusher. Maybe it's a middle linebacker. Maybe it's a nickelback. Maybe it's a corner. Maybe it's like there's other pieces this team needs that I really like, that I think, if you can get, the 49th pick and the 79th pick to move from 7 to 12, I think you do it in 2 seconds and you take Fuaga and you're
you need
good
as
to go.
many second and third round picks in this draft, I feel like, as possible.
Yes. And then move back
Going back to
again.
our first point.
Move back again if you're 38.
Yep.
Move back again. Because there, again, we'll get to some of these names that I think are super, super interesting, that I think we can look at and say, look, this guy had a really good day. And it's not fake, right? Like, it's not, again, I think the AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy stuff, I'm just not sure I love those guys enough before, but I knew they were going to test well. And so now they're going to move up boards, and I don't like it. But we'll get to some of those names. So there you go. It's going to be a fascinating first round draft. That's all I know. And you want to sign up for the in-crowd at Sinkers Beverages to make sure you can maybe come hang out with us. Elliot says he signed up, so go sign up. They'll also give you like a bunch of cool information. They'll let you know when bourbon allocations are coming. They'll send you all kinds of new updates and discounts and stuff. So make sure you check out the in-crowd at Sinkers Beverages. The Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Just remember the name. That's all they ask of you guys listening, is just remember the name, the Kingston Group. So when you have a big decision to make about your house, you know exactly who to call first. Buying, selling, renovating, doesn't matter. You're on the market. You're looking for a home. You walk into a house that you're not sure how much the renovation could cost, or, hey, this isn't going to fit for your family, but it's way under budget and you can do a renovation to it. Call the Kingston Group, give them the specs. They'll walk you through the whole thing, and they'll give you an idea if that's a doable thing. And they will not do you wrong. They give you upfront pricing the whole time. It's all nose to tail information, nose to tail organization. So check out the Kingston Group and Sinkers Beverages. All right, so let's spend some time here on some names that, and I guess I just have to start with Ricky Pearsall just because he's my mid round receiver crush this year. I think he had a 40+ inch vertical, 4.4 speed, 6'1", 190. This is a guy who catches everything. He did it at Florida. He was a reason why Graham Mertz was so efficient in that offense. And he knows the whole route tree. He is a football player, a polished football player. He is not an elite superstar. But my God, that would be he's a starting number 2 for the next 10 years. I love Ricky Pearsall, and I thought he did very, very well at the combine this weekend.
Arm and hand size leaves a lot to be desired. And for me, when I'm same with the wingspan, I don't see number 2. I see a number 3, and that's fine. Tennessee Titans need a number 3, but you can't come in with the small arms, small hands, compared to the rest of the people in the class, compared to the veterans that make it to the Pro Bowl, and expect that you're going to have a starting caliber wide receiver 2. Does not mean that maybe they make the exception for him, but I do think that when you really dive deep into what traditionally, again, these are the metrics that we know that works. When you traditionally look at the physical traits like that, I see his ceiling as a wide receiver 2, but I think that you're going to be settling in for the ride of a wide receiver 3.
Well, and let me be clear, I don't think this is like an option at 38. Like, I don't think this is something I think the Titans should do. I just think he is 6'1".
You have to have another wide receiver. If you're the Tennessee Titans, you have to have drafted another wide receiver before you draft Ricky Pearsall.
That's totally fine. Yeah, totally agree. But if you're 6'1", legit 6'1", with a 40+ inch vertical and 4.4 speed, and with hands that are that good, I thought he showed exactly sort of why I liked him. But to your point, I hope some of those measurements do keep him down, because I want him to be available in the third round.
That's a guy that he goes to the right system, will do really well. I don't think this is the right system for him.
Okay. Who are the guys? I got a bunch of other names here, but I want you to go with some names that you.
Well, I think I want to talk about AD
changed.
Mitchell and Xavier Worthy are two guys that it's really interesting when people test really well at the combine or test really bad, people throw out their opinions out there. And a couple of weeks ago, if you may not remember, it's kind of like an offhanded comment, is that AD Mitchell and Xavier Worthy remind me of Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. And it was more is a lot about their body type, but is a lot about the system they came from. But there was something there that just like there was something about them on tape, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And someone literally this morning, I shared it with Stoney. It was what I've been trying to envision. Like, what is it? This mystery thing. If they're not involved in the route because they know how this system works, they're not doing anything.
They're not
And
engaged.
if they know the ball's not, and that's something that they're obviously coached, right? Save your energy because we're going to be running a lot of plays. I would assume so because they let them get away with it all year long. But same thing that Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. It's kind of like when they were away, when they kind of knew in the back of their mind after a certain point in their progression that they weren't getting the ball, they just kind of gave up.
I don't like that, but yeah, I agree.
And I don't like that, but that is exactly what it was. And so to me, it's like, again, Cedric Tillman tested really well. Xavier and Jalen Hyatt tested really well. And we all thought they were going to go in the second round and maybe even possibly the first. Hey, I'm one of them. So are you tale learned that I am not convinced that A.D. Mitchell, who does not have a really good catch rate and is going to go into the first round. Though I did put out like a facetious, funny X, like hopes and dreams of Mitchell being at 38 out the window, because I still would take the chance on him in the second round. But I don't think he's a first round. I don't think either of them are going in the first round. Maybe the Ravens take a chance on Xavier Worthy because Eric DaCosta kind of did this.
Okay,
he got really horny about it.
So a couple of notes here, and then I want to discuss taking. Let's say they take Joe Alt, right, or trade back and take Fuaga. Let's say that kind of happens. I want to have a little quick kind of conversation about receiver at 38 right here, because I think there's a lot of guys that we could discuss. Xavier Legette, 4.39, ran very well. We told you that. A.D. Mitchell tested very well. We told you that. Xavier Worthy was going to smoke some people at the combine. He did it. We told you that. Troy Franklin did not have a great weekend from Oregon. He's a guy that would
very bad weekend.
Under 176 pounds. He does not have a great diverse route tree. He's quick twitch. He's fast. He's got good hands. He's going to be an NFL player, but is he good enough to be? I mean, at 38, you need to be A.J. Brown almost, right? Like you need to be a starting player at that level. So here's a guy that I think is the opposite, that didn't test particularly well in one thing, but I think it's just a really damn good football player and is sort of a miniature version of Rome Odunze, and that's Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman is a guy that ran a 4.61. Don't love it. Not a huge fan of that. What was A.J. Brown's? What was it, like a 4.56 or something like that? Like he was not as
something like that.
So Keon Coleman's a guy that at 38, if he is available, those are the types of, like, I would prefer him over all the other names we've mentioned, and they're kind of all graded similarly. I think Thomas is well ahead of all these guys. I don't know who else is like 5, 6, 7 on your board at receiver, but Keon Coleman's a guy that I think plays the position really well, incredibly good at the contested catch, made big plays.
He's terrible at the contested catches. He has one of the lowest contested catch rates in the NFL, or in this.
Just when the ball's in the air,
maybe even the lowest.
Okay, well, look, he was good in man coverage when a guy was draped all over him. He was good at Florida State, made big plays in like, yes, and then he had a couple of other agility metrics that tested really, really well. So he was quicker than he was fast, which again, I don't 4.61, fine. But I liked Keon Coleman at 38. I'm just using him as an example. There's guys that tested well, tested poorly. If you're taking receiver at 38, who did you like that gained ground this weekend, and who do you think moved down?
Keon Coleman comes off my board. So out of 39 wide receivers that were at the combine, okay? So the 39, that even the ones that didn't test, okay? 39 wide receivers were invited to the combine. He ranks 31st in contested catch rate. Out of all those receivers, 31st with 33.3%, which is tied with A.D. Mitchell. On top of that, his yards per route run versus man he would be ranked 30th. So everything you've just said that he's really good at is statistically incorrect. It's 100% black and white.
I watched him catch a lot of touchdowns over the top of defensive backs this year. But so again,
being a jump ball specialist in the end zone is a little bit different than what you have to do between 0 and 80 yards.
No question. No question. I can like a player more than you. It's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I just, at least, don't spread misinformation around like you just did.
Fair
let's keep it accurate. I do not. I liked Keon Coleman, and then I started diving into more film, and I do not like Keon Coleman.
Okay.
If I'm choosing a Florida State wide receiver, I'm taking a flyer on Johnny Wilson, like in the fifth or sixth round,
three rounds later. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's so skinny. I don't know. He's so skinny. Anyway,
there's nothing there that for Keon Coleman outside of like just there's just nothing there for me to really latch onto. I don't really like Keon Coleman. He's like A.D. Mitchell. I don't think they're guys. They're guys that don't rank really high. Keon Coleman doesn't rank really high. What the Tennessee Titans have traditionally drafted. Well, the new decision makers are traditionally drafted at wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's totally,
as far as what he does on the field.
Yeah, totally fair.
That shows up on tape. So, like, to me, Keon Coleman was a guy that's a guy that I'm like, I wasn't really sold on him towards heading into the combine, and it cemented that, like, I think I'm good.
Okay, that's fine. I was just using him as an example of like he ran a quote unquote poor 40. I think he's a much better football player than the test that he ran. And again, he had a bunch of other agility metrics that were really good. But more importantly,
he's a 4.5, right? 4.52.
I think 40 time was 4.6. It was slow, but
4.6.
But I want to know, like, what I'm curious about from this discussion is like, who are the players that, because you said you still might take Mitchell at 38, and I don't love that, but I don't think it's a bad decision. But I like Coleman. There's a bunch of other names here, so I'm just curious who moved into that group where you're like, all right, they're on the clock and these 6 guys are available. Who do you like at the top of that list, and who has moved down? Troy Franklin, I think, has moved down.
I don't like anybody really at 38. It's just where
I tend to agree.
That's not great. That's not great for the Tennessee Titans, and that's kind of what, when you kind of look at it. There's nobody. I'm going to have a hard time liking Xavier Legette. And that, I think he's got some drop issues, and that showed up on a couple of the drills at the combine. I think you could talk me into Roman Wilson, but I'm not really sold
38?
At 38. I think you could talk me into it because I think he is a smooth route runner. I think he didn't test as great as I thought he would. Yeah.
Yes, QC. That's a trade back scenario from both of you. So what's the difference in your mind between Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall? What's the difference?
I think Roman Wilson, in my mind, has proven a little bit more to do what the Tennessee Titans want to do. They want guys that can beat man coverage. They want guys that can get off press. He did it against Quinion Mitchell. I saw it at the Senior Bowl. I've seen it. He's a willing blocker. I believe he was a team captain. He's just a guy that kind of just does it all. He's like the jack of all trades, but a master of none. And that's just kind of where I'm at. But I'm not necessarily really sold on it. Like, I'm not sold that Roman Wilson is picked number 38. I think pick 38 is a really bad spot to pick a wide receiver.
Ladd McConkey, he's probably in that range, right?
He's not a number. You have to find your future number 1. Don't bring me a bunch of number 3s, and that's what Ladd McConkey is.
No, I agree. I'm not campaigning for Ladd McConkey. He's going to be in that range.
Yeah, I think that if I'm looking at guys, it's bad. I think Xavier Legette probably has the best shot at being something at number 38 beyond a wide receiver 2. I don't like the odds, but I think it's the best odds.
Sounds like trade back.
I'm a little mad that Jordan Whittington didn't test. I'm a little mad that Malachi Corley, I guess, was there but missed all of everything. I don't really understand. I'm willing to give a shot to Jermaine Burton.
I don't love that.
But I tell you a guy that I like that's going to be in the 4th round, and I think he's going to be, and he probably won't last in the 4th round. I really like Javon Baker. I'm kind of on this.
You've talked a lot about him.
It's not a wide receiver. Yeah. He's a wide receiver 2 in my mind that has a wide receiver 1 ceiling, but I don't think it's going to be an elite wide receiver 1 ceiling. It's kind of like what you would get with like T. Higgins, right? T. Higgins is like, he could be your number 1, but is he going to be a good number 1?
Well, and this is where trading back is so important, because if you like, to your point, if you like Malachi Corley, if you like Javon Baker, if you like Brendan Rice, if you like Jamari Thrash, if you like any of those names, those guys, either the other 2 Washington players, by the way, Polk or McMillan, if you like those guys, and again, I'm a Pearsall guy in the 3rd round, then that's where the value would be for all those players, and that's why they need to add a pick. So,
See,
all right,
this is another reason why I'm very gung ho about wide receiver in round 1. And I know I said that I would take Alt over Odunze. I'm more than likely going to be changing that at some point during this process, because it's going to get to the point where I'm like, there is no wide receiver in the 2nd round. We kind of talked about this at the Senior Bowl. Me and Stoney did. Like, there is depth, but the depth is not in the 2nd round. It's really like 3rd round and later when you compare depth to value, because I don't think any of these guys really provide you a lot of value. Brennan Rice tested okay, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of like a middling kind of guy. But again, I don't know if he's really wide receiver 1. That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that the wide it's great when people tell you there's great depth. There is great depth. But that's the problem. It's that it's almost all depth pieces.
Yeah.
It's almost all wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, very few wide receiver 1s.
And it's also I feel like I have to say this, I'm contractually obligated. Well, the Tennessee Titans technically do have a number 1 receiver right now. So they don't need
for
it
how long? For one more year.
One more year. They don't need it for this year. They need the tackle, both of them, a left or right tackle right now this year. So again, just a small thing to consider. Doesn't mean it should change who your pick is. But the fact that you have Hopkins, who already has a great rapport with Will Levis, maybe that does have an impact on this. Elliot says, let's say they take Odunze at 7 and cannot trade back at 38. Who do they take then? This is what brings us to the combine. What I found fun about the combine. There are so many interesting defensive backs, edge rushers, linebackers, interior offensive linemen, right? If you want to get another a center or a guard, you could get somebody. I'm not saying that that's what they should do at 38. Braden Fisk we talked about him. He had a great weekend. He's probably going to be a mid-2nd round pick now. Lots of corners could be available where you could pick a guy that is probably going to be somebody that could start for you pretty much right away.
Do you pass up on Chop Robinson?
I cannot tell. I can't tell. I honestly can't tell.
His athleticism, man. I mean, he may not even be there, but I just always kind of wondered, like, that athleticism is just off the charts, and
I can't tell.
You can't teach that. You can't teach speed. You can't teach explosion. Off the line, off the snap. I don't know. I know at one point he was like a top 15 pick, and now he's like floating around the 2nd rounds. I don't think that's going to be the case heading into it. Those typically what you saw earlier in the year is typically what is really what's going on. And I don't know, like, it's odd, right? Like, pass rusher is better than depth at 38 is better than the depth at wide receiver at 38.
Or corner, for that matter.
I still think if you go Odunze, though, in this scenario, you have to go offensive tackle, because I think you have to get a Patrick Paul who, with massive arms, had he tested pretty well, and he was really good off the bench. So he's got really good functional strength for his size arms. I would be hard pressed to pass on Patrick Paul in the 2nd, depending on who else is there. Obviously, someone mysteriously falls.
This is what the receiver at 7 does to you, though. It does affect the rest of your draft more, because again, you have Hopkins. So if you take a tackle at 7, alt or trade back at 12 or 14 and get a tackle,
you can take a best available.
You can go best available, because Hopkins is still here this year. And so that's, if you go Odunze, I'm not saying he's not a great player and won't be a great pick. I am with you on that. I completely agree. I love Rome Odunze. I think he's phenomenal, and he'd be great to have as a Titan. I think it's great. Long-term, great pick, great player, etc. But you are then pigeonholed into trying to either fit, like maybe they're going to go sign Tyrone Smith. I don't know, but you can go get receivers in free agency. You can draft receivers later in the draft that are going to be more productive as 2s and 3s. We just got done saying that. If you've got a great corner or edge rusher on the clock at 38, and you've taken Odunze, and then you come back and take a great corner, let's say it's one of the kids out of Missouri, or you get lucky and somebody's there. Kool-Aid McKinstry's there, right? Let's say he's there. Somebody falls. All of a sudden, you take Odunze and Kool-Aid, 2 great picks, 2 really good values for those 2 slots. You still haven't solved your biggest problem on the team. so it's not that that's a bad strategy. It's just that I think your draft board opens up more if you go tackle first. But again, again, I like Sandra. I said,
But is the offensive what's the difference between the offensive tackle class and the wide receiver class this year versus next year?
I haven't looked at the tackle class for next year. The receiver.
I mean,
I don't think either of them are
haven't
good.
either, but that would be a good question to ask is like, can you get by with Bill Callahan? Like we have said, can you get by with someone, at the tackle spots and be fine because you have explosive playmakers now that can make contested catches, be open down the field, could do this, could do that. I based off what the Bengals have done, I would not, I would not expect, based on what the Bengals have done, just them to look at the same way that I think that we both do currently, which is both Joe Alt number 7. I just don't think that's what they look at like. And maybe stuff changes in the offseason because we got, first off, the NFL calendar really needs to give us an additional 1 week break between the combine and free agency, because free agency starting next week is just really very stressful. But by the way, this news just broke that Xavier Worthy has already lined up a top 30 visit with the Baltimore Ravens specifically. I thought that was really funny from our talk earlier. But I do think that the Titans are likely picking top 15 next year. If they're not picking top 15 next year, man, what a great turnaround Brian Callahan, Bill Callahan, Bernard Wilson, and Rand Carthon had all year. So to me, it's like you have to start. You also not only drafting with the idea of this year in mind, but you're also drafting with the idea of next year in mind. So if there's not, let's say, maybe there's no one as great as Joe Alt next year, but there's maybe an Olu Fashanu, Talise Fuaga next year.
Yeah.
There you go.
The other thing about trusting Bill Callahan, if you're going to trust him to develop the guys they currently have on the roster, you got the 2 Y recruits, the 2 Y players, Kingsley and Kieran from BYU and Yale, just 2 big blue Ys as the team logo there. Suamatia and Ahmed Adeja. How do you say his last name? Kieran, the offensive lineman out of Yale.
Kieran for now. I have
Kieran out of Yale and Kingsley out of BYU, and then Paul, for example. Those 3 guys are probably all available at 38. So how much do
and those are guys that I think that you could do a lot with. Right. And I would take either 3 of those guys over Jordan Morgan. And I'm sorry, and I know we just spent like 30 minutes talking about arm length and how they need to do it. You don't need another Project Arm Length to be right. Yeah. You can't have the shortest T-Rex side in NFL history with those 2 guys.
Well,
Jordan
and you
Morgan
need
and Peter Strauss.
Somebody could fall too, whether it's Fatanu at Washington. I don't think that's going to happen. Barton at Duke, Guyton at Oklahoma. Somebody could fall also. So, but are you banking on that? I don't know.
There's a couple of offensive tackles that I've heard through the grapevine. One that I've heard through the grapevine that the Tennessee Titans have shown a lot of interest in, multiple interest in, a little bit above the fray, above the average at the Senior Bowl, and that was Ethan Driscoll. Not a big fan of Ethan Driscoll, but just someone to put out there. Travis Glover is another guy that I feel like Bill Callahan can work a lot with. He's going to be available later.
Christian Jones.
Think I'm going back and I'm charging the responsibility, putting the responsibility on Stoney. I need to know more about Tylen Grable out of UCF. Or is it USF? Wherever that guy tested really, really well. And I need to know more about him. I need to hear the tape. So I need some Tylen Grable tape watch here, Stoney, in the near future for stackinginbox.com. But those are guys like, let me say this, and I talked about this because I'm writing for PK's site once a week.
I was going to say we should have celebrated that, by the way.
The Dominic Puny, not a tackle, but definitely a center, and he's a guy that put up a really great 3 short shuttle time, which is very indicative of your success at the NFL level for offensive linemen in general. Dominic Puny, Scott Fuchs, who used to be with Kansas on their staff for the offensive line, is now here at the Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Dominic Puny needs to be on your radar. At some point, they're going to draft Puny if he's available to them.
There's also Brandon Coleman out of TCU, McCormick out of South Dakota State. Those are also guys that could end up playing center. And these are talking 4th, 5th round here. but I could absolutely see them drafting a center later in the draft. You mentioned Bartolini there for Wisconsin. He did have a good weekend, but I think there's concerns there with his overall size. So Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, corner, I think is a guy that could be available in the second round. I like Mike Sanderstill. I don't know where he plays on this team because you already have a Molden and a McCreary, but I think Mike Sanderstill is a really good football player. Junior Colson out of Michigan also I think is a really I mentioned him last week. I like him. I mentioned Marshawn Nealand out of Western Michigan, the pass rusher, and Marshawn Lloyd, the running back out of USC. All those guys had good days. Braden Fisk had a good weekend. There's just a lot of guys that did pretty well. Your boy Max Melton, I think, is moving up boards because of what happened this weekend. So I think there's some really good corners available. Cam Hart, I love the size and the ranginess. He's a guy I've always liked.
Him, Kyrie Jackson, and Max Melton are both really physical corners that got that dog with them. In them.
Your boy
was it disciplined asshole with grit?
Sure,
is what Denard Wilson called dog. So
I like that.
Those would be three guys. I love me some Max Melton. If they got drafted Max Melton, I'd be all about it.
Well, and again, that's where the third round pick comes in because a lot of those names I just mentioned are corners that are available at the end of the second, maybe early third, and they've got to figure out a way to add that third pick. And again, that might be the reason you can't draft Rome Odunze. That might be that, like, they need to have two more players, and it might be a corner or an edge that they might have to have. So Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is cornerback 1, but I think you have to take him in the top.
Terrion Arnold is
12.
Still had a pretty good week. I would say Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell are like 1A, 1B. They're kind of like, it kind of like a toss up to me.
I'm not a Nate Wiggins.
Both can do what you need.
I'm not a Wiggins guy.
No,
not a Wiggins.
Now he's already
guy.
injured.
Yeah,
I'm good.
So I like Mitchell, but I wouldn't. Again, if you're trading back and you can get him at like 12 or 13, then maybe. But again, you need to add pieces. You can't take a corner at 7. I don't think.
Yeah.
Not if Odunze and Alter there. So, okay. Any other names you want to throw out there to make sure people know that you really, really like that you think?
Did I mention Isaac Gurindo? Like I told everybody that he would have the best running back performance at the combine. I've been talking about Isaac Gurindo. I will continue to talk about Isaac Gurindo. Go watch the Virginia tape if you want to see the explosion, the explosiveness, and the athleticism that he showed up at the combine. He is, to me, the perfect complement in this draft for what the Tennessee Titans want to do and what they want to do with Tyjae Spears. I think that he could be someone that comes onto the field and you could still pass the ball. You can still get him out in open space and you can still move the chains. I'm a big Isaac Gurindo believer. The common pro comp, which is what put him on my radar initially, was Raheem Mostert in his style of play. Obviously, Carthon knows about all the good that Raheem Mostert did at San Francisco. So I'm telling you, Isaac Gurindo needs to be on your radar. If anybody tries to tell you that it does not show up on tape, the athleticism and explosiveness, they do not watch tape.
Here's what's interesting about the running back position is I don't think the difference between the number 1 running back and like the number 10, 11, 12 running back, which is right where
like the number 1 running back's Jalen Wright, right? Or
Brooks,
Trey Benson, maybe Jonathan Brooks, maybe, but you don't really have a clear-cut running back 1.
No, and that's what I'm getting at is that the difference between RB1 and let's say Gurindo, who's let's say he's number 10 or number 11, or Dylan Lube from am I saying that right, out of New Hampshire? Labe from New Hampshire. Let's say he's like they're all like kind of in the same group with Trey Benson, Will Shipley, Braylon Allen, Estime out of Notre Dame, Lloyd, Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Corum, Wright, and Brooks. The cool thing for Titans fans is that number 1 RB and number 10, 11 RB, there's not a big difference in talent and sort of evaluation between those guys. So if Jonathan Brooks goes, let's say 55, and you can get one of these other names in that top 10 or 11 in the 4th or 5th round, then honestly, you're not getting that different of a player. So I think find that line at running back. There's probably about 10 or 11 of them that I think are all kind of about the same. And there's a lot of really good names in there. I just think you're gonna have to spend higher for Brooks or Jalen Wright or Blake Corum. I think Ray Davis is probably going to be more expensive. Marshawn Lloyd's probably more expensive. But could you get a Trey Benson or a Gurindo in the 3rd round? Maybe later, maybe. But again, we run into the same problem. they need.
I was a little hesitant with Dylan Lobby's athletic testing. I'm like, man, he's not really having a good time. But 10-yard split, really, really good.
Yep.
But his short shuttle, 4.02 seconds, that's elite short shuttle time. He's a guy that could do everything. Him and Isaac Gurindo are my guys that I would like the most.
Yeah, and the evaluation of those guys in the top 3 or 4 is not that different, and you can get those guys much later in the draft. So again, middle linebacker, center, running back. I would expect those 3 to be the targets in the 6th and 7th round for the Titans. Yep, on day 3. So okay, all right, we've got lots more time to do all this stuff. Thank you guys for showing up. So much interaction there in the comment section. We do appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube page. And yes, congratulations, Zach, for going to work for Paul Karski. But you can check out Stacking the Inbox on paulkarski.com, so you can check that out. More reason to subscribe to Stacking the Inbox and to pk.com. Of course, football and other F words, Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. If you want a little bit of perspective from the AFC South, we had a long sit down with Ben Arthur, who now covers all 4 teams in the AFC South, but he lives here in Nashville and knows a lot of institutional knowledge about the Titans. Had a long sit down with Rand Carthon. If you want to listen to that interview and kind of get away from draft coverage for a little bit, but still talk Titans, we've got all kinds of stuff over there on Lamestream Sports, so check out that show as well. We've got college football, got you covered there with the SEC. Preds are surging right now. And, of course, Nashville SC with Messi coming to town this week. So lots of stuff for you guys across the network. We do appreciate all of your support. Thank you guys all for watching and for listening. For Zach Lyons, I am Braden Gall. We will talk to you on Thursday.